So dear American and Russian imperialist friends, if I can call you this way, can you distinguish the propaganda from the American and Russian side? Let me tell you, on the 13th day of war, from the sovereign position of a Ukrainian being bombed as a civilian. So I'll just give you a frank perspective from a civilian point of view. What is it like to wake up in your bed at 5 a.m. being bombed and running to a closest shelter which is infested with rats and dust? What is it like to at some moment find all the shelves empty and not being able to connect to your parents? What is it like to stand for 10 hours on a train being completely bombarded by bodies to get out of a war zone? Maybe you have your narratives, maybe you have abstract ideas on what a war may look like, maybe you read some books, but trust me, this is the experience that cannot be shared, and I really hope for each of you that you, my imperialist friends, will never have it. And it's a possibility for us not to have it anymore again if you stop spreading your bullshit online. So how does an evacuation look like? Well, for some people it was really hard. For old people who never traveled from their region, for the people who just evacuated from Donbas in 2014, bought their house, as the person I know, a jeweler, Kateryna Titova, who bought a house in Bucha, and now this house is destroyed by the Russian occupation army. This is like double occupation of Ukrainian people. And for them, it's an experience of terror. You may think that the Russian army is a military enterprise. Well, you're wrong. It's a KGB outlet that actually uses the KGB instruments to work with the population. That's how they terrorize their people. That's how they terrorize the Ukrainians. They don't have an idea of occupying Ukraine. They only have the idea to destroy everything, as they did in Grozny during First and Second Chechen War, and what they wanted to do in Donbas, and now they're doing everywhere in Ukraine. You know, we're losing our homeland. It doesn't matter what you show on CNN, and it doesn't matter where you get your information from. The reality is there. You can find it, you can see it. And the reality is such that we have an empty field bombed with Russian Air Force. You may think that it matters how many people are terrorized, whether it's 40 million people as in Ukraine, or 144 million people as in Russia, or 25 million in North Korea. No, it doesn't matter. Numbers do not matter. You can terrorize the whole world. It's all about how we respond to the terror. And now, as a Ukrainian, I actually know what to do.
Guten Morgen, Russian Schweinesoldaten. Вылазьте, блядь.
I guess the first thing where we need to start is to reconsider the legacy of socialism and the ideology of communism. Did it ever work? No. You know why? Because the whole point is that you can ignore reality, you can kill millions of people for the idea that never worked. And if you are a left-winger, probably you're migrating really close to right-wingers when you become a socialist. And I noticed it on Reddit and other social media that a lot of people really believe that if capitalism falls, if Russia is disconnected from the world, it's gonna bring back socialism, and so they will be happier than people living in the US. Well, you've been misinformed. And the thing is, yeah, Russians are losing businesses, there will be no McDonald's or H&M, and maybe there will be fitter and look prettier in their Belarus dresses that they bought for extremely huge amount of money. But the problem is here is not about socialism as an idea, is that in practice it does not exist. Actually, now Russia is returning 40 years backwards, and the secret police will govern. And Putin will not be the only person to govern. It's going to be like this state absolutely designed for people who have different tools for terrorizing people, for stealing money, and for having their own shops with capitalist goods. The thing is, we now, being bombed in Ukraine, also experience socialism. There is no food, it's really hard to withdraw money, and we don't know what to do next. There is no future. It seems like it's really stable, the war is going on, we don't know how long it's gonna last, but we really feel we're like in a limbo, we don't know where to move. This is how socialism works. There's also this like weird moment about socialism, that it's militarization and expansionism. There is no really economic understanding of why they're doing this. What's the point of occupying or, you know, denazification. Sorry, it's just Putin's word, newspeak. I haven't learned how to pronounce it, but he's doing something in Ukraine. What's the point of this?
Діма, хлопці, от що осталось біля мого дому, блядь.
I guess the answer is exactly why we return to the concept of propaganda when we talk about Ukraine either on the American or Russian side. Because the disinformation is ruling the world. Journalists do not cover what's happening. They have their templates and they just fit what they want to see there. And of course, if you're a critical thinker or just like a person with education, you are suspicious of what is on CNN. I'm suspicious of that too because it does not represent what's happening here. Let me tell you why. The paradox of freedom of speech is that it's really easy to hack. It's really easy to say that any censorship of channels like Russia Today is bad. What if they misinterpret what is on the ground? What if they just want to show what they want to say without actually regarding what's happening? That's exactly what is happening for us. We know that Russians are bombing humanitarian convoys, they're bombing civilians, but then they say that they don't do it. They've been doing this for really long. They did it in Donbass, they did it in Georgia, and all of the world bought into that. And since CNN did not get their playbook to fight against that, you probably haven't heard about that. Only now, when it's too bloody, when it's too obvious, they had to do something about it. Don't think that, you know, American propaganda will show more information just because they hate Russia. They're really opportunistic as well as in Russia. So maybe you need to concentrate on choosing different sources. You know, some decentralized places where people are responsible for their own word. If you think that Twitter is less responsible than CNN or Russia Today, you're wrong. Because these journalists that exist now and are on the payroll, they are responsible for nothing. They have no ethics. They just have their salary and they want to stay in their position. And the worst thing is, of course, with Russian scholars who pretend to be democratic. And they always start this typical phrase, I'm not a racist, I'm not a totalitarian person, but. So that's what they say, I'm a Democrat, but I want Ukraine to be bombed. I'm a Democrat, but I want the world to be assaulted by Russia. And if you think that there is some kind of Russophobia, the fear of Russians, well, I think that you need to question it once again. Was it German phobia when Nazis lost the war? If you see this parallel, you may understand that sometimes this phobia is not about the people, but the ideology that they support, the state that they built. And now we face the country, Russia, that has a really totalitarian ideology that spreads around the world. First it invaded Ukraine, but its plan is to return the world to the times of the Cold War. Putin directly said that it's the time when they felt it was peaceful coexistence. Was it peaceful? Well, it's not peaceful, and it's not going to be peaceful unless there's something happening with Russia. So this Russophobia is justified. And I should tell you right away that Russophobia is about the state, not the people. But Russophobia has to be contemplated in Russia as well. If you're a Jew, if you're an Asian, if you're Ukrainian, if you're a Middle Easterner, you have a pejorative name in the Russian language. If you live in Moscow and St. Petersburg, you'll be absolutely smashed by these words. You will never feel as a normal person. This is the country that was grown by the Soviet Union, and because we never get rid of socialism and the idea that everyone is equal, but for some reason white Russian is more equal than other, we will not be able to build a democratic world. We need democracy, we need human rights, and they should not be hijacked by totalitarian leaders saying that, oh, you know, everything is propaganda, there is no truth, everything that you see on TV is wrong because we do propaganda, because CNN does propaganda. Well, maybe there is something in between, and let's listen to the people on the ground, let's see what's happening, their bodies, their blood. Maybe this is going to persuade you. And if you are still skeptical, the only way to be less skeptical is to travel to Ukraine and see it on your own eyes. So maybe a few minutes ago you felt some pain lower than your back when I called you an imperialist. Maybe you're liberal, maybe you're left-winger. Well, let me explain you that there is some truth to what I'm saying if you're an American. So there is Vice News. You probably read it. And Vice News published three pieces of news. One was about a transgender who cannot cross the border because he is a male in passport. The other one was about a black man from Africa who pushed kids and women around and jumped on the fence, so he was apprehended by the border police. And the third one was about the racism in media representing the crisis in Ukraine. And these are the news that collected the most amount of likes on Vice. Well, on Facebook you can see actually that these news had different reactions, and most of it was a happy face. Because people understand that it's a huge manipulation, but nonetheless, it's there. It's the most viral type of news because it appeals to identity politics, to kind of, white Ukrainians being terrible people, they're not special, why don't we cover Syria like this? Well, I'll tell you right now that Syria is bombed by Russia as well. So if you go to Moscow and Kremlin, you basically cover the same topic. But the thing is, why Vice News does it? I lived in Brooklyn, and I know that people who work for Vice News don't get salary. The only way to monetize their work is to find some kind of sponsorship. So, you create an outlet where you publish everything kind of for free, and then suddenly you get a proposal to publish something, maybe a double standard, or maybe a true manipulation. That's how you get these news. And, the outlet is really happy with this news because they bring more attention, they bring more audience, people are infuriated. They want to comment. This is how these liberal imperialists work. They just want you to be aggravated. They want you to react. They don't care about the quality of the information. And the funny thing is that Vice News published actually an analytical article about this type of news, criticizing them, saying that this is a new level of Russian propaganda when they create a pro-Ukrainian news with the discourse of a racist saying that, oh, blue-eyed people are crossing the border, they're like us, let's protect them, and then blaming those media coverage for being racist. They create something that they will call racist. Do you get this? And you get it, right? And then you like it and you enjoy it because this is something that you can relate to. You, as a transgender, as a black person, as someone being in a really terrible situation in Syria, whatsoever, you want to think that, we are also humans who need to be protected. But there is a little trick. If someone is killed, it doesn't matter that their life is worse or better than yours. We have all lives to be preserved. All lives matter. Black lives matter. Transgender lives matter. We just need to be more united against propaganda. We don't need to be split up by identity politics. We just need to represent what we care for in such a way that it's democratic and we all can unite against the secret police, the manipulations, and of course big money that just want to let us stay untuned about what's happening in the world. I mean, if we finish the thing in Ukraine, we will finish expansionism in North Korea, in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and other countries that used to be invaded by the Soviet government or are now invaded by the Kremlin. And what you really need to know about propaganda is that it's not just about twisting information, giving you wrong facts. It's actually about completely creating a bubble in which you cannot get true information. I cannot connect with my friends in Russia. One of my friends is jailed now for being on the protest. Do you care about freedom of expression in a country where it's impossible to express yourself, even in a peaceful manner? How can you find an in-between place with a totalitarian country and democratic world? Russia wants to say that they were triggered by NATO. They were triggered by the US. And they forget that, they are situated in Europe, that Ukraine is a sovereign state, that there is a huge history of wars between Russia and Ukraine, that there is an episode of a genocide executed by the Kremlin in the 30s. It's called Holodomor. That's actually when all of the grain was withdrew from Ukrainians and they died because of hunger. Yeah, Russians will probably create different narratives that it happened not only in Ukraine but in Kazakhstan and other regions. But that's exactly what I'm saying about identity politics, which should not say that if it happens somewhere else, then in the other place it doesn't matter. Let's look at who organized it. What is the center of this? And if you trace it, you'll find out that actually without the secret police that exists in certain countries, it's impossible to organize terrorism. Usually, if you have a terrorist, you have a tie to a huge organization that has decades of history that tries to manipulate people with huge outlets of information, and they work systematically to rewrite history. It's not like, someone had the revisionism. No, you always trace money, huge money, oligarchs, people who govern institutions, scholars. And in this way, you can discover the source of violence and wars. So there were some brave voices in Russia, but now they're gone. They have no institutions to channel their opinion through. And I'll tell you, if you're looking for middle ground, maybe you need to look into Ukrainian news, context, and what people say, probably someone like me being independent, maybe, just ask someone real without trying to understand the in-between line of American and Russian propaganda. There will be no in-between in propaganda. It's a prescribed solution that these institutions want to reach. Well, I hope that I didn't kill you with this truth, my imperialist friend. I hope that you will not turn more leftist or more right-winger if you know what's happening. Just maybe become softer, maybe become less opinionated, that you can deduce truth by your abstract ideas. There is death. There is pain. We go through it. We are concerned about our parents. We are afraid for our friends everywhere in the world, including Russia. And the only way to stop it is to destroy the Kremlin. So considering all this, is this propaganda? Answer in comments. Please subscribe and like the video.